Welcome everyone to our very first presentation of this year's Food Security Series as we discuss what it means to eat local and how we can all do that. This morning we are talking about what's up with the price of food and what can we do about it. And we have two excellent educators for us here that are right in the business. They're part of agriculture here in the Shuswap, and they are retailers as well, so they really do have a great grasp of what's going on with the price of food. We have Toni Walton, who's the manager of Buckerfield here at Salmon and also is a farmer with Avery's Acres. And we have DeMille here, who is the owner of DeMille's Farm Market. So we're going to start with Toni this morning. She's going to be looking at it in the lens of how the price of food is affecting her raising animals and how it affects the price of the meat that we buy. Toni.
Woo! Thank you. Okay, so as Melanie said, my name is Toni, and I do manage Buckerfields, but today I'm going to speak more on how I raise animals at home. Avery's Acres, I wouldn't necessarily refer to us as a farm, but more of a homestead. We started doing this to make sure that we had the healthiest products for our own selves, and in the process of doing this, we started out with egg layers and moved on to pigs and meat birds and turkeys. We realized that there was a demand for organically fed food in the Shuswap, and local community members started asking for our meat and our eggs, and we realized that we had a demand for it and created a small business with it. Over the past few years, you've noticed such an increase in the price of not only feed, but also things like fencing. It's gotten much worse in the past year. Fencing is a huge part of raising meat. You need to make sure that your pigs are contained. You need to make sure that your turkeys have a run, that they have some shelter, so on and so forth. There's so many different aspects of it, even including down to getting your processing complete. The prices of processing have increased. The prices at the butcher shop have increased. So we chose to do this in order to make sure that we had healthy food going into our own bodies, as well as members of the community, and giving the best product we possibly could, as opposed to, we don't know where the food comes from that's at the grocery store. If you were to go into maybe a name brand grocery store, you don't necessarily know where that pork is coming from, where that chicken's coming from. We wanted to know what was in our food. Therefore, we chose to raise our feed organically. We actually shop organically at Pete's Feed out in Armstrong. So a way to save money is, instead of buying it by the bag, we actually buy it by the tote. So we have 1,000 kilograms at a time. So that's a way of saving money. When it comes to feed, also, we do supplement with garden scraps. We supplement with that obnoxious knotweed that everybody has, but you know what? I tell you, my pigs and chickens love it. Anyhow, I do see the price increase at the store level when it comes to retail. So I know that things are going up. It's not just me that's feeling the pinch, and I know that customers want to be able to buy the best product that they can. So they are questioning it. I'm noticing a little bit more so now, because the price at the grocery store is still cheaper than the local farmer or homesteader. And I just want to get the word out there that these people are really not trying to price gouge, because we do get a lot of comments like that. And we actually have to stay competitive with one another, just like I'm sure Brad has to stay competitive with Pedro's or Askew's to make sure that people are getting the same price. So if somebody's selling a dozen eggs down the road from me for $5, I can't very well sell mine for $7. So everybody needs to sort of work together in this area as well. Does anybody have any questions?
Could you give us some sense of how much, like, feed prices and fence prices have gone up? Is it 10%? Is it 50%?
Fencing is way higher. Like, we've seen massive increases, like 20%.
Wow.
It has slowly started to climb down a little bit this past spring season, but prior to that, last year was atrocious. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's everything from the wire to the fence post, like the wood fence post. Last year there was just a shortage at the treatment plant. You couldn't even get certain sizes of fence posts. Hi.
I was wondering, I heard that with the drought this summer that a lot of the fencing, electric fencing wasn't working and that animals were getting loose. Did you hear about that? Do you know why that is?
I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if they were using solar as opposed to something that was actually plugged in. That could very well be it. Yes.
I think it's because you couldn't ground it. Like dry soil doesn't.
For me, I didn't experience it because I don't have that sort of property, but if you're talking like big commercials, sure, absolutely.
And that also means a lack of hay too, right? There's a challenge with hay.
Yes, hay prices have actually just gone up as well. Yeah. You know, from a retail perspective, we still try to keep our prices as low as we possibly can, especially with things like that. I know we just got a hay increase, and I did not raise the price just because, you know, there is a shortage and people need this stuff. Anybody else? I think I'm going to hand it over to Brad, and he's going to talk more on the retail side of this, I think. And we'll. Oh, hi.
Hi. I was just watching. It's actually a movie that just came out on YouTube about Westwold and
Yes.
the province not allowing farmers to water hay.
Yes.
I'm just wondering how we can support each other to fight the fight we need to fight.
That's a very good
I
question.
mean, I know there's fish that we have to look after, but maybe people shouldn't be filling their pools, and we should be using the water for more. How valuable that is affecting our food chain.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is to that. I have watched that documentary as well. I have spoken to people who have talked with the ranchers about that. I think we need to start asking those questions. I think we need to, I don't know if we go to City Hall and ask those questions or what the proper answer is. Maybe it's worth a trip out there ourselves to go and talk to these ranchers and farmers and see what, you know, by the looks of things, they're more than willing to talk.
Well, and you experienced water shortages too.
Myself? Oh, I had no water for 10 days. And it was really hard to even find a tradesperson to be able to come out. I have a very deep well, but the regulator went in the pump and we didn't know. That's not our forte. And so it was, what do we do? So we actually had empty caged water totes. So you can't do anything with an empty 1,000-liter tote. So it was a little bit of a life lesson. Make sure that you're prepared all the time so you can water your livestock. I mean, we ran out of water with 50 egg layers, 50 turkeys, some meat birds, probably, what did we have at the time? 140, and 2 pigs, plus ourselves and our dogs.
Yeah, and also there's a flood in May and a drought in September. So it's not just, it's a big discussion.
It is a huge
It's not
discussion.
a symptom, it's a symptom of a larger problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to helping,
Yeah.
I think, well, do we go to City Hall? Is that the answer? I don't know. Maybe Brad has some ideas on that.
Sure does.
Okay.
I'm pissed today.
Over to Brad.
I'll start my timer. So my name is Brad DeMille. I am current owner of DeMille's Farm Market. I've been an owner of it for 17 years. Myself and my staff, we work very hard at bringing BC to you. Not only local growers, we represent 175 local growers in our store. Years ago, we looked at them as a challenge to our bottom line because they could deal with cash, go away to winter in Mexico for 6 months and be gone. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Besides a lot of things. So we looked at how we can bring them in the fold and be part of what we do. It's been a very successful campaign. What it's done is legitimize their income streams and made them so they don't have to go to a place to pitch a tent once or twice a week for a few sales. And if their product's not ready, they still were required to go. What we give them is access to 93% more marketable hours. And for them, they realize better income, a more relaxed pace, because I think the last thing they really want to do now is pitch a tent twice a week in a hot parking lot. Talking about why your food costs so much money. It's about time. It has. We were living in a fantasy land for years with lower costs than we should have been realizing, And it's caught up very quickly to our reality of not only that we're a third world country as far away as we can be from America. They don't have to come here and give us their food when they're short of theirs. We have to pay for that privilege, and this is what we're doing. In Canada, specifically BC, we consume 55% of what we grow. We get supplied 50% of what we grow, we eat, but they have to subsidize 45% of what we eat by importing it from other countries, i.e. Typically Mexico, California, Texas, Arizona, those places, Florida. If we don't change that, it's getting worse in a lot of ways, because that 45% is going up in price all the time. A number of reasons why it's going up, and it should be no surprise to anybody. Labor. In 5 years, labor has gone up 61%, just minimum wage alone. At the bare bones, it's gone from $10.45 to $16.85 for every 14-year-old kid that comes in looking for a job that doesn't know anything. Plus you have to match wages, CPP, unemployment insurance, all these things you have to match. The employer ends up paying $21 an hour approximately for an employee that doesn't know anything about work yet. And that's where it starts. Add fuel costs to it. Everything that is imported in this country has fuel that touches it. Whether you produce it, pick it, again, labor, you ship it, you fly it, you put it on a boat, it costs money. And if it's not gonna make enough money, a good example of that is watermelon. You've noticed that watermelon and corn is like 12 bucks a dozen, 10, 12 bucks a dozen. From the US, we couldn't even get corn this year because it's not worth shipping. Unless there's a value to that pound that you're gonna ship, let's say a pound of blueberries is worth way more than a pound of corn. Unless that pound of corn comes up to a certain value, it's gonna sit on the loading dock in California until it becomes worth something, until you're ready to pay for it. It's a luxury item in the off season. Same as a watermelon from Mexico. You don't have to have it. It's a luxury item, it's a choice. So you're gonna choose to pay what used to be $4 is now 12 bucks. It's not 20%, it's not 40%, it's 3 times the value that you used to pay. And that's not going to change. We can't grow watermelons in the wintertime, and that's fine. We have to do what we can do. Working on a lot of the challenges we have in Canada, especially from a retailer's point of view, taxes. If you have a young kid that's $16.85 an hour, you're paying taxes not only on their behalf, but to the government in that. All of it's gone up from the city that's seeing their labor going up, so they have to raise their taxes. It's just a completely utter nonsense, and it's out of control. The province has approximately, between the province and the federal government, 8% of our population works for some form of governance. That means that 1 out of 12 people in this room works for the government. They should be opening the door to help us. They're actually holding the door shut, so you can't get in and get help. And so what happens is you spend all this money to get help, but nobody's helping you. What's interesting is that 12% number, 8 to 12% is roughly about what we get taxed between provincial tax and GST. So really you're just paying those people to work for you, and they don't produce a lot of actual stuff like we do every day. And this is the problem. If you're not producing something that's tangible, you have nothing but air. Down the road, when we realize that all these taxes are crippling all the stuff that you're trying to do that's doing it well, whether you're talking to your municipality, your city, your provincial representative, they have to understand that they're the problem. They are the folks that are the gatekeepers and are stopping progress. From a provincial level, we are in an ALC, an agricultural land reserve, that if you own agricultural land, let's say out in Westfield's a good example, you can't do anything else with that land except for what you're supposed to do, grow food. You can't subdivide, you can't put housing on it, can't do anything. There's limitations, and there's some differences in there as far as camping and things like that. Now all of a sudden the province comes in and says, now you can't use water because we need the water for the 6 fish that are left, or whatever. I don't know the exact number on that, but now what do? You have someone that's locked in, paying taxes on land that you're not allowed to grow food because you can't water it. And that alfalfa will probably go to Abbotsford or Lower Mainland to either feed the horses, again, a horse is probably kind of a luxury these days, and they're expensive. And if hay goes from $10 to $17 a bale this year, you watch, it's coming, because Saskatchewan and Alberta have had a drought year also, just like BC. We've had 3 good crops, I believe, in BC of good hay, and it's been great hay weather if you can water it. If you don't water it, you get a quarter of the volume off. So you get, for every bale you get, you could have got 4. That's where we're at. And that's where the shortages come in January, February, when everyone's looking for alfalfa pellets because there's no more baled hay left. Canada, BC, a couple of stats here. We have the highest labor in North America. We have the highest taxes, highest fuel, and the longest lines at hospitals. And we pay the most to get that. I'm not speaking in a political sense, but we shouldn't be happy. We can do better than this. And what's happening when this stuff costs you your food, and it's a direct cost because you see it every day because we all need to eat. Speaking to that, 63% of us throw away 37% of our food that we take home and buy. So let's take our budget. If we were to cut that in half, let's say it's 20%, and we can save that 20% by not throwing it away, aren't we making a difference on our own budget already? So we could definitely do better at home, starting with that 20%. The next thing we can do is, might be a sensitive subject, but we all have enough calories to go around. 75% of Canadians are now considered overweight or obese. We're competing with Americans. We're rapidly becoming almost first. We need to have an education on what this costs us, not only our health, the cost to your food. So you're overbuying, and you're throwing it away, and you're complaining that it's costing you a lot of money. Who's the guy at fault? I'm the guy that overbought. Some stats, look on the internet. It's amazing how much fruit and eggs and bread especially are thrown away every day because we just overbuy and we aren't creative enough with our leftovers. It's rather fascinating that it's really our fault. And I think looking at yourself as a solution before a big government body that's not going to care, because I'm a little bit disillusioned at every level of our governments, starting with the top, federally, provincially, city-wise. They're great people. They have limited power to go in and something like Westfold, the local council and controllers, whether it's, I can't remember what the regional district would be, they have little to no power from a water management point of view. When you look at what it costs specifically for us to grow corn, our hydro bill was $25,000 just to pump water. And that's for about a 3 and 4 month period. You have a water bill that they want, start talking about assessing a water bill for you per gallon to haul out of there, out of the river. Your labor, your fuel, seed cost, weed control, delivery, picking, all of that adds up. And when you consider a $1.29 a cob for corn, that's gonna seem pretty cheap in about 3 years. And it went from 75 cents to $1.29 in 2 years. Very similar to the amount of labor has gone up since 5 years ago, 61%. These numbers can be correlated of seeing why we're seeing rises in prices, because we're all realizing at every level, we're realizing the labor and the tax on fuel and all of this, it's all relative to what you're eating and what you're putting in your mouth. But it starts at your house. If you can save that 20% by not throwing it away and making something creative. I mean, during COVID, we learned how to cook again. We sold more yeast than any time in history. And now I can't give it away. And we're nuts. And then this young lady was saying about the dog food. Last month when the smoke and the fires, everyone bought dog food because they're holding on to their dog food. Well, you might be eating that dog food pretty soon. Be careful. Because I think there's good nutrition in that, right? I wouldn't mind. I used to think I was an 8-year-old kid. I used to nibble on that stuff in the back porch. But to be proactive on what you have in your freezer and your fridge, don't rely so much on all the stuff that's in there in your freezer and fridge. Ask the guys in Scotch Creek how that worked out. Everything went bad. Everything's garbage. So when something goes wrong, don't rely so much on the piece of food, that fish that you had in your freezer. Assume you're going to have no power. There's nothing wrong with a big bag of potatoes, a bag of rice, a bunch of onions, some of your staples that Grandma and Papa used to make their stuff with. And maybe if anything comes to shove, like everyone knows what stone soup is. Okay, here we go. Stone soup, if I have a pot and I'm walking down the path and a guy's got some stones and nothing else, the next guy I run into, he might have some carrots. And the next girl I run into, she might have a bit of leftover cabbage from her trimmings. As you go through the community, we can all make enough food to feed everyone in that place. And it all started with someone with a pot and some stones. You couldn't eat the pot, you couldn't eat the stones, certainly could eat the peppers, but when they're all combined with a bit of community effort, you're gonna get enough to feed everybody. Again, that 37% that we're chucking out the back door, whether it's this compost thing that we're having trucks drive across the road and pick up our compost and take it and mix it in with the general landfill up in the city. I don't know that 100%, but I suspect that's what's happening. We could probably fix our problem with a bit of stone soup. It wouldn't be that tough, honestly. And I think that if we be creative ourselves by limiting the waste that we're chucking out and blaming somebody else for, I think it starts at home. Regarding fuel, in your prices and all the excuse of all the costs of everything. If you look at refrigeration, refrigeration is derived from fuel. It's from refineries. Refrigeration has quadrupled in price in 4 years. A compressor that I would be able to freeze a 20 by 20 freezer, I could have bought for $3,500 3 years ago. That now costs me $12,000. Who pays for that? All of you do, eventually, if you're gonna buy that product. And this is the cost you're seeing. They're unbelievably out of control. And how to get back into that, a lot of this stuff's made offshore, not necessarily in the United States. A large part of the refrigeration and technology comes from Mexico. They do a really good job there. Their labor, though, is starting to creep up because we want these standards of labor everywhere, which is fine. But what you're doing is you're making them, everything in Mexico costs twice as much as it used to, and then the broker takes his share and all that stuff goes on. All the taxes that are added to it, whether it's a provincial tax, sales tax, carbon tax, all this stuff is added to it. And the fight on fuel is ongoing, and it's from a federal, it hasn't reached provincial level, but it's really important to understand that that eventually they want your propane and your natural gas is going to be eliminated in Canada, and it's not that far off in the future. Give you an idea, back to how much we waste in Canada. 130,000 heads of lettuce, 1.3 million pounds of tomatoes, 2.6 million pounds of spuds, 650,000 loaves of bread. On and on, 1.3 million pounds of apples, and we're all guilty of it. Oh, it looks bad. We buy with our eyes and it goes into a number 2 bin. We're all guilty, and we can all do way better. And I think, again, back to it, it really does start at our level. If we can fix some of this stuff at home, maybe we make that deficit up by being more efficient at home, maybe looking at our diets a little closer for that calorie that we can avoid. Maybe make our own ice cream one day again with that milk that might be going a little off. So, and I believe that we can all do better. And if we show by example that we can do better, reduce our own food costs, maybe the governments and the guys that are actually watching this can learn by some of our examples of how to do better. Because what we've seen on a provincial and a federal level, even municipal and city-wise, given the governance on Westfold, I really don't anticipate a real great leadership on there. And I think that what we're seeing in this country is poor leadership on a lot of these fronts, because they're not starving yet. And maybe if they miss a meal or two, which they clearly could afford to, maybe they'll start to understand where this food is coming from and the challenges that we see just on a day-to-day basis, and the budgetary constraints that we're seeing on this. And I think from our perspective, like in DeMille's farm market, the challenges that we see, we talked about this the other day, that every year has this challenge, whether it's COVID for God knows how long, 3 years, then you get into a flood season, it flooded and now we're in a drought. How can we manage that a little bit better? And what do we learn from that? Of course, you have a Ministry of Highways that built a road that flooded after they spent millions of dollars engineering it. So you have to question these guys. They're not always right. They make mistakes also, and that's allowable. And I think that's understanding, because they're not always perfect, as we're not perfect. This year, when the fires came as a challenge to DeMille's, we had $50,000 worth of peaches for sale for the next week. And then everyone was told to go home. What they should have been told is to go home with a box of peaches. That would have solved a lot of problems for me. So we got creative. We went to Golden, we went to Revelstoke, we went to Williams Lake, we went to Prince George, and hauled them out of the patch to get them sold. We ended up basically costing out on them, but we didn't lose $50,000 worth of peaches. And so that's important. And so in order to make a lot of these changes in what we're doing, I think we all have to be prepared to pivot. Not go the path that we've been going with blinders, thinking this is gonna be like this forever. We need to open our blinders up, spin around and take a look who's behind you and see what else you can do to make a difference. So if you're prepared to pivot and not be so entrenched in your daily activities of saying this is gonna be a sustainable thing, I'm gonna do this forever no matter what happens, then I think you have a clue, and then you're beginning to understand how to solve the problem. And if you're not prepared to do that, well, you guys can eat the 37% you're throwing away one day, and or the dog food that's left over from. But you know, I wouldn't do that anymore because I was 8 years old then. So, anyways, that's basically. It's not rosy, but I think what we can do, number one, at our own house, is start fixing our problem internally, and then maybe start identifying other people's problems instead of just always pointing the fingers at someone else. Municipally and city-wise, I think the city could have more land available for small farmers at lower cost. How they do that, because land costs these days are tough. I mentioned it last year. I can't afford to buy my dad's family farm, and I'm in business, and my business is okay, but it doesn't support me buying a $4 million piece of land. I can't get financing. I can't. The interest rates are high, and what does that say? I'm a pretty good example of kind of a pseudo success. And then you come to someone else that has an idea out of college or whatever, says, I want to farm. And everyone tells you no because you'll never make it. And they're probably right, because I can't make it on my family farm. I lease it, and that's all I can afford to do. And I will not get it as a gift and inheritance, I'm pretty sure of that. So a lot of these relationships that you have with your family and people that have land, I think we need some general stewardship from above on people that have larger lands. Like some of these parks that are donated with the walking around, I think that's great. But maybe we need some bare land that can be arable, that we can invite people to grow food for our community. And maybe we can call it Stone Soup Park or something, I don't know. And maybe it starts with something that simple. I have a pot and I have some rocks. So let's get started. Any questions or rocks that you want to throw into the pot?
That was really good. Thank you. That was excellent. Very inspiring. Does anybody have any questions?
I was wondering, Brad, if you have some sense of, let's say 5 years ago and now, what percentage of your product is Shuswap growing? And is it growing or is it going the other way?
What we do in our market is pretty unique, I think. I'm going to guess at this number, but at the 175 suppliers of product that it's canned, jarred, fresh, dried, we supply about $2.5 million into their economy. 5 years ago, let's go 7, because 7 is when we really started to pivot again from where we were buying it strictly from wholesalers and this kind of stuff. That number was about $150,000. So increase huge. And a lot of these growers are seeing, specifically a lot of the more the ones that get it kind of growers have increased their sales, their production by 400%. And they're not even going to the markets. What we do is a kind of a loose fit cooperative. And I don't like to use that word because co-ops don't work. Typically, they just cannibalize themselves and eat each other within, and it just falls apart. because it's a little bit too onerous on the growers to manage themselves. And that's hard to do. Growers are a lot like artists. They have a passion. They see the vision of what they want to do. They just have a hard time getting there business-wise. And so what we've done is be able to manage them to slow it down, grow this stuff over a longer period of time, and learn to compete where there's nobody else standing. That is so important, and we still haven't learned that. All of British Columbia grows within, let's say, loosely fit, it's a 6-month growing idea. We have 6 months left. But we're doing nothing besides growing flowers and things like this and some spinaches and stuff at the coast. And of course there's fuel challenges with that. But we're not putting this stuff in frozen in cans. Like if I grew sweet corn, like I tried to get my dad years ago to pivot to instead of competing in the summer where everyone and their dog has sweet corn, why don't we pull it off the cob, freeze it, and sell it in every store in the 6 months where nobody else is standing? Funding for that is not available. The leadership from governance is you go to a government website to apply for a fund, like a grant. Seriously, you need someone with a PhD to wade through this load of garbage that they make you fill out, all for one simple answer. Is there funding or not? It takes you literally months, and then it's an onerous task. Back to your question, the support that we give farmers is, I think, unprecedented on a single market. We should be looked at as an example of, I think, a limited success or a success for everyone involved in it. Once we added the liquor store, which is not really my favorite business, there's another 140 farmers that are loosely tied to that too. So you could say we represent 300 farmers in under one 6,000 square foot roof. I think that's pretty cool. It's hard because, again, like artists, you have to manage them because they're all over the place. And I get that passion, but you need to control them and to show them that this is how much you plant, slow it down, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, do it again, and then do it at the shoulder seasons where we can be really strong in this country, where we're totally messing it up, is the shoulder season starting in March all the way through maybe even consider November shoulder season. Those are strengths that are there for us to take. We are just squandering it because the temperatures aren't horrible. And I think that we can grow stuff. The problem is with our greenhouse designs, we're putting these plastic boxes on top of the ground for all the wind and the frost and everything to take advantage of it. Let's get smart and dig a hole and put it in and put a lid over top. You're starting at 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Why start at -20? It makes zero sense engineering wise, and those things are doable. And those will make your shoulder seasons way more popular and way less costly to keep up to. And I believe that there's some initiatives there that certainly any level of government could see. City-wise, you're challenged. It's tough to run this city. They have so many roads and so much infrastructure to take care of. It's difficult. And provincially, they make a lot of money. In the lottery alone, I bought tickets. I've never won 100 million. I've never even met anyone that's won 100 million. So hopefully that answers your question. I think that it is growing, and I think the awareness of the BC product that we're getting in our place. We have this one young fellow from Cherryville. He's got the best lettuces. He has this 3-pack, and every week I take a 3-pack home, and I make my salad every night from it, and it's just such a fresh treat. And he's a great young man, and he gets it, and he's just barely making it though, because he's a long ways. Cherryville's a long ways to come from, 3 times a week. So, okay.
Thanks for having me.